He was a titan of industry, a man who built empires with code and charisma. He promised his pregnant wife the world, starting with a palatial mansion overlooking the glittering expanse of Los Angeles. It was to be their forever home, a monument to their love and the family they were building. But on the day he chose to give a private tour to his mistress, unveiling it as their new kingdom, he made a fatal miscalculation. He assumed the mansion, his grandest secret, was empty. He was wrong. What happens next isn't just a story of heartbreak, it's a story of chillingly calm revenge that dismantled an entire empire. The Los Angeles sun, a relentless, buttery gold, spilled across the breakfast nook of their penthouse apartment in Century City. Gwen Grant traced the rim of her porcelain mug, the steam from her decaffeinated chamomile tea warming her face. At 7 months pregnant, these quiet morning moments had become her sanctuary. From their 40th floor perch, the city sprawled below, a concrete and glass testament to the ambition that hummed through the very air they breathed. Her husband, Ethan Grant, was a product of that ambition, a celebrated figure in the world of fintech. His company, Nexus Financial, had revolutionized digital transactions, and at 35 he was spoken of in the same hushed, reverent tones as the tech gods of Silicon Valley. He sat opposite her, not looking at the view, but at his tablet. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his thumb scrolling with a speed that still mesmerized her. He was handsome in that sharp, modern way, a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite eyes, the color of a stormy sea, and a mind that never ever seemed to rest. "Did you sleep well?" Gwen asked, her voice soft. Oh yeah. Fine," he murmured, not looking up. Just hammering out the final details on the Aura project. It's a game changer, Liv. Biometric payments linked directly to a user's unique cardiac rhythm. Completely unhackable. "That sounds incredible, honey," she said, and she meant it. She was proud of him. But a familiar pang of loneliness echoed in the space his distraction created. He was here, but he wasn't. His mind was always in the next quarter, the next innovation, the next frontier. Lately that distance had felt more profound. The late nights at the office, the hushed phone calls he'd take on the balcony, the faint, unfamiliar scent of a perfume she once smelled on his suit jacket that wasn't hers. She dismissed it as paranoia, a side effect of hormones and the anxieties of impending motherhood. "I was thinking about names again," she said, trying to pull him back to her, to them, to the tiny life that was hiccuping against her ribs. "What do you think of Rowan, if it's a boy?" Ethan finally looked up, a practiced smile clicking into place. It was his public-facing smile, the one he used for magazine covers and shareholder meetings. It didn't quite reach his eyes. "Rowan Grant, I like it. Strong. Classic." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His skin was cool. "Anything you choose will be perfect, Liv. You know that." He was an expert at saying the right thing, at placating her worries with a single, well-timed phrase. And for the past 5 years of their marriage, it had worked. She had believed in the beautiful narrative they were writing together. They were the golden couple, the tech mogul and his elegant architect-turned-homemaker wife. The centerpiece of that narrative, the ultimate promise, was the house, the Crestwood estate. A sprawling 10,000-square-foot modern marvel nestled high in Holmby Hills. Ethan had bought the lot 2 years ago and commissioned a famous architect to build their dream. Gwen, with her background, had been deeply involved in the initial designs. She'd planned the nursery down to the last detail, envisioning a mural of a gentle forest scene on the wall. She'd imagined their child taking its first steps on the heated limestone floors, and learning to swim in the infinity pool that seemed to melt into the city skyline. "Any news from the contractor?" she asked, her voice full of hope. "Are we still on track for a move-in before the baby comes?" Ethan withdrew his hand and picked up his coffee. "Almost there. Just some final touches. Smart home integration security systems. You know the works. I want it to be absolutely perfect for you and the little one." He winked. "I promise it'll be worth the wait. I have a very special unveiling planned. Just for you." He stood up, tall and imposing in his custom-tailored suit. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. The gesture felt wrote a box being ticked on his morning checklist. "I've got to run. Board meeting at 10 then, a lunch with investors. I'll probably be late tonight. Don't wait up." "Okay," she whispered, as he walked away, his expensive leather shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. She stayed at the table long after he was gone, the silence of the penthouse pressing in on her. The promise of the mansion was supposed to be the culmination of their dreams, but lately it felt like a bargaining chip, a beautiful distraction he dangled in front of her to keep her from looking too closely at the cracks forming in their foundation. The late nights were becoming more frequent, his explanations more vague. The investor lunches seemed to stretch for hours. That evening, as the city lights began to twinkle to life, Gwen felt a wave of anxiety so strong it made her dizzy. He had said he'd be late, but it was past 11 p.m. She called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. She tried his assistant, a brisk woman named Penelope, who informed her that Mr. Grant had left the office at 5 o'clock. A cold dread, sharp and unwelcome, snaked its way around her heart. Where was he? She sat on their plush velvet sofa, the remote for the television feeling heavy and useless in her hand. Her gaze drifted to his tablet, which he'd forgotten on the coffee table in his haste that morning. It was a breach of privacy, a line she had never considered crossing. But the fear was now a physical thing, a sickness in her stomach that was far worse than any morning sickness had been. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. It was unlocked. With a deep breath that did nothing to calm her, she began to search. Ethan was a creature of technology, his life meticulously organized in a series of interconnected apps and calendars. Gwen knew this was where his real life was documented, not in the vague pleasantries he offered her. Her first stop was his primary calendar. It was filled with the usual entries: board meeting, Nexus Q3 projections, lunch with Morgan Stanley. Everything looked exactly as it should. Too perfect, in fact. A flicker of intuition, a wife's sixth sense, sharpened by months of unease, told her she was looking in the wrong place. Ethan was a man of redundancies and backups, but also of compartments. He would never be so careless as to leave incriminating evidence in plain sight. She remembered him once mentioning a private encrypted calendar he used for sensitive R&D brainstorming. He'd shown her how to access it on his secondary browser, a more secure one he used for confidential work. He'd trusted her with the password "Livin' Forever," a bitter irony that now tasted like ash in her mouth. Her fingers flew across the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. She found the browser, typed in the password, and the private calendar bloomed to life. It was sparsely populated, but one entry for tomorrow, Friday afternoon, leaped out at her. 3:00 p.m. Crestwood final walkthrough. KR. The initials meant nothing and everything. They were anonymous, yet specific. Why was this walkthrough on his private calendar, and who was KR that they merited a private tour of the home he had promised to unveil to her? The cold dread began to solidify into a terrifying certainty. She scrolled through past entries. Dinner, KR. Drinks, KR. Weekend strategy session, KR. The dates corresponded perfectly with all his late nights, his unexplained absences. KR. The letters pulsed on the screen. Who was she? Gwen's mind raced through the names of his senior staff. No one fit. Then a memory surfaced. A few months ago at a company gala, a young, strikingly beautiful woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and raven-black hair had approached Ethan. She was an associate from a rival venture capital firm, and her name, Gwen, now recalled with sickening clarity, was Kinsley Ryder. Gwen had noted the way Kinsley looked at Ethan, an undisguised hunger that went beyond professional admiration. She had also noted the way Ethan's public smile had for a moment become something genuine and unguarded. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a physical blow. Gwen felt the air leave her lungs, a silent scream trapped in her throat. He wasn't just being distant, he was living a double life. But the evidence, while damning, was still circumstantial. She needed something concrete. Her mind, usually occupied with color palettes and floor plans, was now razor-sharp a detective's mind. She thought about the mansion. Smart home integration, he had said. Ethan was obsessed with his own company's technology. He would have undoubtedly used a Nexus integrated system. On his tablet's home screen was a folder labeled Nexus Home. Inside was a single app. She tapped it. A list of properties appeared: Penthouse, Hampton's House, and there at the bottom was Crestwood Estate. Her breath hitched. He had already set it up. He had linked it to his account and, by extension, to their shared family plan. It was a colossal, arrogant oversight. He had built a digital fortress around his affair, but had left the main gate wide open for her. She selected Crestwood Estate. A dashboard materialized, showing temperature controls, lighting settings, and security feeds. Most of the cameras were still offline, awaiting final installation, but 3 were active: the front gate, the main entrance hall, and one labeled Living Room, Panoramic. She tapped the living room feed. The screen filled with a grainy black and white image. The room was empty, shrouded in darkness, except for the ghostly shapes of furniture covered in white dust sheets. But the system was active, and it had other features. A microphone icon currently grayed out, a scheduling function, an activity log. She navigated to the activity log, her hands shaking so badly she could barely control her fingers. And there it was, a log of every time the system had been accessed, multiple entries from Ethan's phone, and several from another device, identified only by its ID number, but the access times correlated perfectly with the KR calendar entries. He hadn't just been planning to take her there tomorrow. They had been there before. The final devastating blow came when she explored the app's notification settings. A user could set alerts for when doors were opened or motion was detected. 2 users were registered to receive these alerts: Ethan G. and Gwen G. He had added her. Whether out of habit or as part of some twisted long-term plan to eventually present the house to her, he had given her the keys to his secret kingdom. He had built the trap, and then, with breathtaking arrogance, handed her the blueprint. The room began to spin. Gwen leaned her head back against the sofa, one hand protectively clutching her swollen belly. The baby kicked a sharp, insistent reminder of the life she was carrying, the future she had been so sure of. The tears she had been holding back finally came hot and silent, but as they streamed down her face, they weren't tears of grief alone. They were tears of rage. The shock was burning away, leaving behind something cold, hard, and resolute. He thought she was just the decorative wife, the soon-to-be mother, the keeper of his perfect home. He had underestimated her. He had mistaken her quiet nature for weakness, her trust for naivete. He was about to find out how wrong he was. She looked at the calendar entry again. 3 p.m. Crestwood final walkthrough. She wouldn't confront him. She wouldn't scream or throw things. That was the reaction he would expect, the one he could manage and dismiss as hormonal hysterics. No, she would do something else. She would be at the mansion tomorrow. She would be waiting. The next day, the brilliant Los Angeles sunshine felt like a personal insult. The world dared to be bright and beautiful, while hers was collapsing into shadow. Gwen moved through the morning in a fog of controlled fury. She packed a small bag with a bottle of water, a snack and a spare phone charger. A prenatal checkup scheduled for noon served as the perfect alibi. She called Ethan's office, her voice a pitch-perfect imitation of her usual gentle tone. "Penelope, hi, it's Gwen. Could you please let Ethan know I'm heading to my appointment? My phone might be off, so don't worry if he can't reach me for a couple of hours. Of course, Mrs. Grant. I'll let him know. All the best with the appointment." The lie was seamless. At 1:30 p.m., instead of driving back to the penthouse, Gwen pointed her white SUV towards the winding roads of the Santa Monica Mountains, heading for Holmby Hills. The drive, which should have been filled with joyful anticipation, was now a grim pilgrimage. Each familiar landmark, the iconic Beverly Hills Hotel, the perfectly manicured hedges of Sunset Boulevard, was a knife twisting in her gut. This was the life he had built for them, and it was all a lie. Her mind was a maelstrom. She replayed their entire relationship, searching for the signs she had missed. Was it all an act? The romantic proposal in Paris? The tender way he'd held her when they first heard the baby's heartbeat? Was any of it real? Or was she just a component in the architecture of his success? The perfect wife, to complete the portfolio of the perfect life. She clutched the steering wheel, her knuckles white. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in her chest. But something else was growing stronger with every mile, a cold, clear-eyed resolve. The woman driving this car was not the same one who had woken up yesterday morning. That woman was trusting, soft and accommodating. This woman was a strategist. She was a mother protecting her child from a world of deceit before it was even born. She was a partner in a multi-million-dollar enterprise called their marriage, and she was about to conduct a hostile audit. She had spent the morning not just planning her arrival, but preparing for the aftermath. She had made one phone call to a name given to her by her father years ago, just in case. Beatrice Webb was not a divorce lawyer. She was a legend in forensic litigation, a woman who dismantled corporate empires for a living. Gwen had left a calm, concise voicemail. "Beatrice, it's Gwen Grant, daughter of Robert Shaw. I need to schedule an urgent consultation. It concerns my husband, Ethan Grant, and his company, Nexus Financial. I have reason to believe there are significant financial improprieties." That was her trump card, her ace in the hole. The affair was the wound, but his finances would be the weapon. Ethan's arrogance was his weakness. He thought his digital world was impenetrable, but he'd taught her too much. She knew how Nexus worked, how he moved money, how he structured his deals. If he was careless enough to leave a trail of his affair, he was almost certainly careless with his money. As she turned onto the secluded, tree-lined street that led to the Crestwood estate, her heart began to pound, a frantic, heavy rhythm against her ribs. The gates were closed. She pulled over, took out her phone, and opened the Nexus Home app. Her finger hovered over the icon for the front gate. With a soft click, she sent the command. The magnificent wrought-iron gates, decorated with a sleek, modern G, swung silently inward. She had just used his own technology to trespass on the grave of her marriage. She drove up the long, curving driveway, paved with pale grey cobblestones. The house came into view and she had to stop the car for a moment. The sheer beauty of it, a stunning, painful sight. It was a masterpiece of glass white stone and rich mahogany. It was everything she had dreamed of. A tiered garden led down to the infinity pool, which was a sheet of sapphire under the afternoon sun. She parked the car in the empty, cavernous garage next to a space clearly intended for Ethan's sports car. She took the elevator, another feature of the smart home system she could control up to the main floor. The air inside was cool and still smelling of fresh paint and new beginnings. It was a cruel joke. Sunlight flooded the main living area through a floor-to-ceiling wall of glass that offered a breathtaking 180-degree view of the city from downtown to the Pacific Ocean. The furniture was still under wraps, but she could see the outlines of the pieces she had chosen with him months ago. There was the sprawling L-shaped sofa, the custom-built media center, and in the corner, a single elegant armchair positioned to perfectly capture the sunset. This was where she would wait. She walked over to the armchair, removed the dust sheet, and folded it neatly. The chair was upholstered in a soft, dove-grey velvet. She sat down, her posture perfectly straight, her hands resting on her stomach. She was a queen taking her throne in a silent, empty kingdom. She didn't turn on any lights. She didn't make a sound. She just sat a ghost in her own future and waited for the man who had promised her this world to bring another woman to claim it. The clock on her phone read 0:55 p.m. They would be here any minute. The purr of a high-performance engine grew louder, a sound Gwen knew as well as her own heartbeat. It was Ethan's Aston Martin. Through the vast glass wall, she watched the sleek gunmetal grey car glide up the driveway and park near the front entrance. The driver's side door opened and Ethan emerged. He looked confident, energized, a man at the peak of his power. He smoothed down his jacket, a gesture of vanity she had once found endearing. Then the passenger door opened. Kinsley Ryder unfolded herself from the car. She was even more striking than Gwen remembered. Dressed in a sharp, blood-red power suit, her black hair cut in a severe, stylish bob, she radiated an aura of ruthless ambition. She surveyed the mansion with an appraising, proprietary gaze, as if she were inspecting an asset she had just acquired. Ethan came around the car and draped an arm around Kinsley's shoulders, pulling her close. He kissed her a deep, passionate kiss that was nothing like the chaste pecks on the forehead he gave Gwen. It was a spectacle of betrayal performed on the front steps of the monument to his lies. Gwen didn't flinch. She watched them, her expression unreadable, her heart a block of ice in her chest. She was an observer now, a data analyst, collecting her final, irrefutable points of evidence. She could hear their voices, slightly distorted through the glass as they approached the front door. Ethan was using his master of the universe voice. "So what do you think?" he asked, his tone dripping with pride. "It's substantial." "Ethan." Kinsley replied, her voice cool and appraising. "A bit traditional for my taste, but the location is undeniable. The potential is here." Potential. She spoke of Gwen's dream home as if it were an underperforming stock. Ethan laughed. "Don't worry. The interiors are a blank slate. The original plans were domestic. We can gut it, make it ours. Something sleek, minimalist, a proper power base." The word hung in the air, a poison dart aimed directly at Gwen's heart. He wasn't just replacing her, he was erasing her. He unlocked the door and they stepped inside. The grand entrance hall, with its soaring ceiling and floating staircase, was designed to inspire awe. Kinsley, however, seemed unimpressed. "The acoustics in here are terrible for parties," she commented, tapping a stiletto against the marble floor. "We'll need to address that." "Consider it done," Ethan said, his voice eager to please. He was like a teenager showing off his first car. "Come on, you have to see the main living space. The view is the real selling point." He led her toward the living room, toward Gwen. Her heart rate didn't even quicken. The waiting had distilled her emotions into a single potent concentration of purpose. She was no longer a victim. She was an inevitability. "We can host the Nexus Gala here next year. Kinsley was saying as they entered the room. Forget the Beverly Hilton. This is the ultimate statement. Power isn't just about what you own. It's about where you entertain. Exactly. Ethan agreed, his arm still around her. And this room, this is the heart of it all. Just look at that view. From here you can see everything you own. He gestured grandly toward the window, his gaze sweeping across the panoramic vista. Kinsley followed his gesture, a small, smug smile playing on her lips. And then her smile froze. Her eyes widened her focus, shifting from the city below to the still silent figure in the armchair. Ethan, noticing her sudden tension, followed her gaze. For a moment, his brain simply refused to process what he was seeing. It was a system error, a glitch in the reality he had so carefully constructed. He saw the armchair, the woman, the swollen belly. He saw his wife, Gwen, sitting in the heart of his secret world, her expression as calm and placid as the surface of a frozen lake. The color drained from his face. His confident posture collapsed. His arm dropped from Kinsley's shoulder, as if she had been struck by lightning. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning system. "Gwen!" He breathed his voice, a choked, strangled whisper. It was the only word he could manage. His empire of lies had just collided with its one inescapable truth. Kinsley was the first to recover her shock, quickly curdling into indignant fury. Her eyes narrowed into slits, darted from Ethan's ashen face to Gwen's serene one. "What is she doing here?" Kinsley hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. She looked at Gwen, not as a person, but as a squatter, an obstacle that needed to be removed. Gwen's gaze remained fixed on Ethan, ignoring Kinsley completely. She slowly, deliberately placed a hand on her pregnant belly, a silent, powerful gesture that redefined the dynamics of the room. This was not a confrontation between a wife and a mistress. This was a reckoning for a husband and a father. "Hello, Ethan," Gwen said, her voice unnervingly calm. It was not the voice of a hysterical, wronged woman. It was the voice of a CEO about to liquidate a failed asset. "You seem surprised to see me. I must have gotten the time for my special unveiling mixed up. My mistake." Ethan flinched as if she had slapped him. He took a half step forward, his hands raised in a gesture of supplication. "Liv, what are you... How did you get in?" A faint, mirthless smile touched Gwen's lips. "You gave me a key, remember. You added me to the Nexus home account for Crestwood Estate." Such a thoughtful gesture. "It allowed me to open the gate, call the elevator, and make myself at home. Your technology is very efficient. You should be proud." Each word was a precisely aimed dart, puncturing his composure. She was using his own creation, his source of pride and power, as the instrument of his exposure. Kinsley scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, please, spare us the melodrama. Ethan, handle this." She turned her back on Gwen, dismissing her, and began examining the grain on a mahogany panel, as if the conversation were beneath her. Ethan looked helplessly between the two women, the furious, demanding present, and the calm, judging past. "Liv, please," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Let's not do this here. Let's go home and talk." "Home," Gwen repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "Is that what we're calling the penthouse now? Or did you mean this place? It's a bit confusing, as you seem to have promised it to both of us. You'll have to be more specific." She finally turned her head and looked directly at Kinsley. "He told me this was our forever home. For me and the baby. What did he tell you? It was a power base, something you could gut and make your own." Kinsley spun around her face, a mask of contempt. He told me he was leaving his sad domestic little life for a real partner. Someone who understands his world. Someone who isn't just a housewife. The insult designed to wound glanced off Gwen's armor of cold fury. A housewife. Gwen mused, her voice dangerously soft. That's what he told you I was. He neglected to mention I hold a master's in architecture from Columbia, and that I personally co-designed the first 3 floors of the Nexus headquarters, or that I oversaw the initial structural plans for this very house before I was sidelined because my domestic condition became inconvenient. Ethan's face went from pale to ghostly white. He had systematically minimized Gwen's contributions, reframing her as a dependent to justify his betrayal to Kinsley and perhaps to himself. This has been illuminating. Gwen continued, her gaze snapping back to her husband. But I didn't come here to argue over who gets the house. I came for clarity, and I have it. She gestured to Kinsley. She is a symptom, Ethan. The real disease is you, your weakness, your deceit. Gwen, I am so sorry. He pleaded, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. I messed up. I don't know what I was thinking. We can fix this. I'll end it. Right now. It meant nothing. Nothing. Kinsley shrieked, her voice raw with disbelief. You told me you loved me. You told me you were drawing up the divorce papers. Gwen watched the chaotic scene unfold as if from a great distance. She had expected this. The frantic apologies, the desperate lies, the predictable implosion. She let them tear at each other for a moment, their ugly symbiosis on full display. Then she stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and commanded the attention of the room. Both Ethan and Kinsley fell silent. Stop, Gwen said, her voice cutting through the tension. Just stop. Your performance is pathetic. And it's over. She looked at Ethan, her eyes devoid of any warmth, any of the love that had once filled them. You didn't just break my heart, Ethan. You tried to make me a fool. You underestimated me. And that is a mistake that will cost you far more than this house. She walked past him, heading for the door. She didn't look back. Liv, wait, he cried, reaching for her arm. She stopped but didn't turn. Don't touch me, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was more menacing than any shout. Don't you ever touch me again. She pulled her arm away and walked out of the living room, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. She left them there, 2 co-conspirators in a failed coup, standing in the ruins of the future they had tried to steal. The confrontation was over. But the war had just begun. The silence Gwen left in her wake was a physical presence in the room heavier than the dust sheets on the furniture. It pressed down on Ethan, suffocating him. He stood frozen, a statue of disbelief, his gaze fixed on the empty doorway, through which his wife and his entire, meticulously curated life had just vanished. The adrenaline that had surged through him during the confrontation evaporated, leaving behind a nauseating, hollow dread. Kinsley broke the silence, her voice a whip crack in the stillness. Well, she said, her tone dripping with scorn. That was a Category 5 disaster. You told me she was docile. You told me she was emotionally fragile and easily managed. I thought she was... Ethan mumbled, his voice sounding alien to his own ears. He ran a trembling hand through his hair, his mind struggling to reboot. I don't understand how she found out, how she got in. She told you how, you idiot. Kinsley snapped, her ambition now curdling into pure transactional analysis. She was no longer his lover. She was a risk manager, assessing a catastrophic failure. She used your stupid self-congratulatory app. My God, for a man who built a fintech empire, your personal security is a joke. You might as well have sent her a printed invitation. She began to pace the length of the vast room, her stiletto heels clicking an angry staccato rhythm on the marble floor. Her mind was already calculating the fallout, the damage to her own carefully constructed trajectory. This changes the entire equation. A messy public divorce is one thing, but a pregnant wife who looks like a damn saint and sounds like a prosecutor, the optics are catastrophic. This is bad for the Nexus brand, which, in case you've forgotten, is inextricably linked to my brand by association. Ethan stared at her, a flicker of disbelief piercing the thick fog of his panic. Her words were clinical detached. There was no sympathy, no us against the world. There was only damage control. What about us? He asked the question, sounding weak and pathetic even to him. Kinsley stopped pacing and turned to face him. The look she gave him was not one of anger, but of profound pity, the kind one reserves for a hopelessly naive fool. Ethan, was a strategic alliance. It was a merger predicated on a smooth, upwardly mobile transition of power. What you're offering now isn't a merger, it's a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Your stock is plummeting, and I am not tying my portfolio to a sinking ship. So that's it, he choked out. After everything I promised you, this house is a liability, she shot back. It's Exhibit A in her case, against you. What do you want me to do? Ethan move in and start measuring for curtains while the world press camps out at the front gate. She let out a short, bitter laugh. You're toxic, and I have a reputation to protect one I've built far more carefully than you've built yours. She walked over to where she'd dropped her crimson handbag, scooping it up with a swift, decisive motion. For a moment, Ethan thought she was just going to leave. But she paused, her expression shifting into something colder, more calculating. However, she said slowly, my silence could be valuable. My discretion regarding certain conversations we've had about Nexus board members, about future market strategies you shared with me in confidence that has a price. The blood ran cold in Ethan's veins. She was threatening him. Blackmail. Kinsley, don't. She smiled, a chilling, razor-thin line. Don't what, Ethan? Don't protect my interests the way you should have protected yours. You wanted a partner who understood your world. This is my world. Leverage, mitigation, survival. She took a step closer, her voice dropping. Wire $1 million to my holding account by Monday as a consulting fee for my troubles, and I will simply fade away. If not, well, a tell-all interview with Forbes about the unstable leadership at Nexus Financial might be very therapeutic. He stared at her, seeing her for the first time, not as the vibrant, exciting escape she represented, but as the ruthless predator she truly was. He had been her mark all along. He said nothing. He couldn't. Seeing the utter defeat in his eyes, Kinsley seemed to decide he wasn't even worth the effort of blackmailing. He was already ruined. She scoffed. You know what, forget it. You probably don't even have access to that kind of liquid cash anymore. You're a mess. She turned and walked toward the hall. At the edge of the room, she stopped for her final parting shot. Your wife was right, you know. It's not the cheating that's your fatal flaw. It's your weakness. You pretended to be a king, but you're just a boy who's terrified of being alone. She walked out without a backward glance. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the house like a gunshot. He was utterly alone in the monument to his own folly. He stumbled over to one of the dust-covered sofas and sank into it, his head in his hands. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Gwen's contact photo, a picture of her smiling, taken last summer in Italy, before the baby, before Kinsley, before everything had shattered. He pressed call. It rang once, then a cool, automated voice informed him the number he had dialed was not accepting calls from his line. She had already blocked him. The full, crushing weight of his isolation descended upon him. He had lost everything. His wife, his child, his mistress, his dignity. It was all gone. All he had left was the suffocating silence of a cold, empty house that felt more like a tomb than a home. Meanwhile, Gwen was navigating the winding roads of Holmby Hills, her hand steady on the steering wheel. Her heart, which had been a block of ice during the confrontation, was beginning to thaw, and the pain was immense. A wave of grief, raw and powerful, washed over her, so intense it made her gasp. Tears she had refused to shed in front of him now streamed down her face. Tears for the man she had loved, for the future she had believed in, for the family that would now never be. She pulled the SUV over to the side of the road, beneath the shade of a large jacaranda tree, and finally let the sobs come. They were ragged, tearing sounds ripped from the depths of her soul. She cried for the betrayal, but also for her own lost innocence. One hand rested on her belly on the steady, rhythmic movement of her baby. This innocent life, her coal was the anchor in her storm. After a few minutes, the storm passed, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red-rimmed, but the woman staring back at her was a stranger. There was a hardness in her eyes, a set to her jaw that hadn't been there yesterday. The soft, accommodating architect was gone. In her place was a survivor, a fighter. She didn't mourn the loss of that old self. She embraced the new one. She had been forged in fire, and she would not break. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she wiped her tears, reapplied her lipstick with a defiant flick of her wrist, and started the car. Her course was set. Her grief was fuel now. She drove toward Century City, the gleaming towers a symbol of the world he inhabited, a world she was about to turn upside down. She pulled out her phone, found the number her father had given her, and made the call. "Is this Gwen Grant?" a crisp, no-nonsense voice asked after one ring. "It is," Gwen replied, her own voice, cool and composed, betraying none of the turmoil from moments before. "This is Beatrice Webb. I received your voicemail. My schedule is tight, but your father was a good man, and your message had a certain, compelling urgency. I've cleared my afternoon. Can you be at my office on Avenue of the Stars in 1 hour? I'll be there in 45 minutes, Gwen said, and ended the call. An hour later, Gwen was sitting in a supple leather chair opposite the legal legend herself. Beatrice Webb's office on the 50th floor was a testament to understated power. The desk was a single, massive slab of polished granite. The walls were adorned not with diplomas, but with original modern art that spoke of immense success. And through a vast window behind her desk, the city sprawled out, a kingdom Beatrice Webb surveyed daily. Beatrice listened, her hands steepled her sharp eyes, missing nothing as Gwen recounted the events of the day. She didn't interrupt. When Gwen finished, Beatrice gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Infidelity, Mrs. Grant." Beatrice began, her voice a low, precise instrument. "Is a tragedy. Legally in California, it's a footnote. A court doesn't care why a marriage ended, only how to divide the assets. So tell me, why are you really here? Why did you mention financial improprieties?" This was the moment. The affair was the wound, but this was the weapon, because he paid for his affair with someone else's money. Gwen said, her voice steady. Beatrice leaned forward, a flicker of genuine interest in her eyes. "Whose money?" "At first I thought it was just his. Then I realized it was his company's," Gwen stated plainly. She slid a slim, meticulously organized portfolio across the polished desk. Ethan is arrogant about his digital security. He gave me access to his private encrypted server years ago. He never revoked it. The password was our wedding anniversary. A grim smile touched her lips. I spent last night going through it. I'm an architect, Ms. Webb. I am trained to find structural weaknesses. Beatrice put on a pair of sleek, black-framed glasses and opened the portfolio. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the documents. Aperture Holdings, she read aloud. A shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. Standard rich man procedure. Look at the expense logs, Gwen urged. Coded as discretionary project funding. You'll find a 5-night stay at the Baccarat in New York in March, a lease on a Porsche Taycan for a consultant, Ms. Kinsley Ryder, a $50,000 wire to Cartier, logged as promotional materials. The expenditures are a perfect mirror of his affair. Beatrice turned a page. This is sloppy. Grounds for an unequal division of community assets, perhaps. We could claw this back. But you said it was company money. It is, Gwen said, taking a deep breath for the final blow. Aperture Holdings wasn't just funded by his personal wealth. For the last 18 months, he has been systematically bleeding Nexus Financial. He set up Aperture as a vendor, funneling millions into it through fraudulent invoices for intercompany service fees and software licensing agreements. He was licensing his own stolen tech back to his own company. He hasn't just been cheating on me, Miss Webb. He's been stealing from his shareholders to do it. It's not just a divorce case. It's wire fraud. It's embezzlement. Beatrice Webb slowly closed the portfolio. She took off her glasses and placed them carefully on the desk. She stood up, walked to the immense window, and looked out at the glittering towers of Century City. For a full minute, she was silent. Then she turned back to Gwen, and a slow, predatory smile, the smile of a shark that has just scented blood in the water, spread across her face. "Mrs. Grant," she said, her voice filled with a terrible, thrilling admiration. "Most clients come to my office seeking a settlement. They bring me their pain and ask me to turn it into money." She gestured toward the portfolio on her desk. "You haven't just brought me a divorce case. You've brought me a goddamn hand grenade with the pin already pulled." She returned to her desk and sat down, her eyes gleaming. "He tried to take your future. You, in return, are going to take his empire. Here is what we are going to do first." 6 months later, the Los Angeles winter sun cast long shadows across the city. The name Ethan Grant was no longer on the lips of adoring tech journalists, but in the headlines of the Wall Street Journal's financial crime section. The grenade Gwen had handed Beatrice Webb had detonated with spectacular force. An anonymous tip to the SEC, detailing the fraudulent activities of Aperture Holdings, had triggered a full-scale federal investigation into Nexus Financial. The board, in a panic, had forced Ethan to take an indefinite leave of absence. His assets were frozen, his reputation shattered. Kinsley Ryder, implicated in the investigation and facing legal troubles of her own, had vanished from the scene, her career in venture capital ending as abruptly as it had begun. The Crestwood estate, the half-furnished symbol of their hubris, was now a legal quagmire tied up in the asset seizure and destined to be sold off to pay corporate fines. Gwen, however, was miles away from all of it, both literally and figuratively. She hadn't taken a dime of Ethan's money in the divorce settlement. She didn't want it. Her victory wasn't financial, it was absolute. Beatrice had ensured the divorce was swift, and that a substantial untainted trust fund was established for the baby from Ethan's few remaining legitimate assets. Gwen now lived in a beautiful, light-filled craftsman-style house in Larchmont Village. It wasn't a palace of glass and steel overlooking the city. It was a home filled with warmth, character, and the scent of baking bread. The walls were painted in soft, warm colors, and in the backyard, a majestic oak tree stood its branches, offering shade and a sense of history. In the nursery, there was no elaborate mural. Instead, the walls were covered in framed architectural drawings Gwen had created herself, whimsical sketches of fantastical cities and magical treehouses. In the center of the room, sleeping peacefully in a simple wooden crib, was her son. She had named him Cole. Rowan was the name she had chosen with Ethan, a relic of a life that no longer existed. Cole was his own person, a new beginning. She stood over his crib, watching the gentle rise and fall of his tiny chest. He was the only thing that mattered, the one pure and perfect thing to come out of the wreckage. Her love for him was a fierce, protective force that had guided her through the darkest days. The confrontation in the mansion felt like a scene from another woman's life. She was no longer defined by Ethan's betrayal, but by her own resilience. She had started a small independent architecture and design firm with an old friend from college. They were already gaining recognition for their focus on sustainable human-centric design. She was building again, not with steel and glass, but with integrity and purpose. She was laying a new foundation, one that was entirely her own. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from her father. "Saw the news about Nexus today. He took a plea deal. Just thought you should know. So proud of you, Liv. Love, Dad." Gwen read the message, took a deep breath, and deleted it. She walked over to the window and looked out at her new life. She didn't feel triumph or vindication. She simply felt peace. Ethan Grant was a ghost, a cautionary tale. He had tried to build an empire on a foundation of lies, and it had crumbled to dust. Gwen, on the other hand, had lost a mansion, but had gained a home. She had lost a husband, but had found herself. And in the quiet hum of her new life, with her son sleeping soundly nearby, she knew she had built something far more valuable and enduring than Ethan Grant could ever have imagined. She had built a future. Gwen's story is a powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can often forge the strongest survivors. It's a testament to the fact that a person's true strength isn't revealed when life is perfect, but when their world is shattered and they must choose to piece it back together, not as it was, but as it should be. She walked into that mansion as a victim and walked out as the architect of her own justice. Her calm, calculated response shows that sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't a loud, fiery explosion, but the quiet, methodical dismantling of a liar's entire world. If her journey from heartbreak to triumph resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of quiet strength over loud deceit, please honor her story by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own resilience, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true-life dramas that will leave you breathless and inspired. Thank you for listening.